Hello and welcome to the podcast. Last weekend, to nobody's great surprise, the ITV drama series Mr. Bates vs. the Post Office won a special BAFTA award to add to all the others. The series, which starred Toby Jones and Monica Dolan, has been extraordinarily successful, but its executive producer, Patrick Spence, has said that he could not have made it today. I wanted to find out from Patrick why this is the case, and how the funding crisis has affected the projects he most cares about. Patrick Spence has won other BAFTA and Royal Television Awards in a career which has seen him be head of drama at BBC Northern Ireland, creative director at ITV Studios, and now managing director of AC Chapter 1. He is also known for shows such as Peaky Blinders and Ralph and Katie, so if he can't get sufficient funding for projects, who can? Patrick Spence, welcome to the podcast. I just wonder, we're talking on Thursday. It must have been a very long weekend for you with the BAFTA Awards. What time did you get to bed?
Do you know what? Not too late. We slipped away at about 11:30, I think. It's a long day, the BAFTAs. You kind of start to gather at midday, and by about midnight, it's been 12 hours. So that was enough.
And what's the scorecard now with Mr. Bates versus the Post Office? I mean, how many awards have you got?
Do you know what? Embarrassingly, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's quite a few. It's probably more than 10, I think, if you count them all. We got a few special awards last year outside of the kind of official circuit, and then we gathered a few. I think what's interesting about Mr. Bates, here's what I'll say about awards, is that it does appear that we have been acknowledged and appreciated by the very mainstream awards, National Television Awards, TV Choice, whatever, and also the more kind of what I would describe as art house awards, Sky Arts Awards and things like that. In other words, it's a show that's peeled across all boundaries, if you will.
And the thing what I found surprising about that is that you'd assume two things from that. First of all, it was a very obvious sell. Secondly, everybody will now be trying to make another Mr. Bates. And neither of those propositions are true, are they? I mean, it wasn't when you go back and think about the programme, there'd been a lot about journalism, investigative journalism beforehand about what had gone in the Post Office. So when you were trying to pitch this, what was the immediate reaction of those you were talking to? Because it was unpromising in some ways.
It was an easy sell. ITV snapped our hands off for it. They were the first people we took it to, and they absolutely snapped our hands off. And honestly, I would love to tell an anecdote about me being a brilliant producer, beating doors down and persuading people who didn't see the genius. But that's not the case. And actually, I'll turn it around the other way and say my pitch to Polly Hill at ITV was, you sort of have to tell this story. You are morally bound because everyone else has been trying for 10 years. Great journalism has been conducted for the last 10 years and no one's paying attention. So now it is beholden upon you, ITV, the country's mainstream channel, to tell this story because somebody's got to allow those sub-postmasters to feel heard. And I told Polly the story and she said, do you know what? At that stage, she just commissioned a script, but she said, I am going to do it and I'm not going to do it because I'm guilt-ridden and I think we should be. I'm going to do it because I think it's an important story. It needs to be told. But also, I think our audience wants stories like this. I think you're underestimating the power of this story on a mainstream audience, Patrick, and we're not going to do it as a charity job. We're going to do it because this is a triumphant story of ordinary people fighting back against a ghastly establishment. So she saw the value in it as a mainstream piece of entertainment, as well as what ITV have, and it's why we took it to them first, a long tradition of telling these kinds of stories. So when you say, will it persuade others to do more stories like it? I keep saying to anyone that raises that possibility, the BBC, ITV and Channel 4 have been doing stories like this for the last 20 years. They're not the ones that need persuading. The problem these days is that it's harder to finance the deficit, the rest of the budget, on international sales because they're harder to sell internationally. But, you know, the BBC and ITV in particular have been doing lots of stories like this and will continue to do so.
But what they can't do now is fully fund them.
Yes, That's absolutely true, yeah.
I mean, we know all about the BBC losing 30 to 40% of its the true value of the licence fee since 2010. We know ITV are in some difficulty. So you get the script, they like the script. What proportion of the budget then did ITV put up?
That's a very good question. And the honest, simple answer is that if we were doing it in the open market, if you will, if we hadn't, as producers, worked for free, which we had to, and if we hadn't asked our cast to do it for far less than we should have paid them, even on ITV, the budget would have been £2.4 million an hour, and ITV put in £1 million an hour. So you do the maths, it's...
Well, it's around 40%, yeah.
40%, right? But actually, we ended up making it for £2.2 million an hour because I couldn't raise enough money to get us to 2.4 with a four-parter about sub-postmasters and computer systems.
And wait a minute, and you just said earlier, you didn't get paid. You pushed this project through.
None of us did, yeah. It was the only way. I mean, it wasn't my plan at the start, but there came a point, and that's what's, that's the problems we're all having in this industry at the moment. There came a point where the choice was very clear. Either we could make the show and defer our fees in the knowledge that we'd never see them, and indeed ask the cast to do it for, we offered them, think sort of regional theatre rates, and we said, everyone gets paid the same, take it or leave it. And we got the first choice in every role that we went to. So
Toby Jones, Monica Doyle and all of those did it for the same rate as everyone else and far, far less than they could have got in another production.
In another ITV production. I'm not comparing their rates on an ITV show with what they might have got if they were doing something for Apple. I'm saying we paid them far less than they would normally earn on ITV. And they all said yes. They said, where do we sign?
And even allowing for that, and you got the budget per hour to 2.2, as I understand it, you still haven't made a profit.
I think it has just about broken even now. As of a year ago, it was still £1 million in debt, but I think it will. Netflix have offered to buy it, and ITV won't sell it to them yet. So there is when Netflix gets it at the end of its lifetime, there will be a profit, but it won't be huge. And that's only because it was such a big hit here that it has more or less broken even. But these four-part, very exquisitely British dramas, they're unfundable from now on. There's no international market.
What has changed then? It was difficult to fund 2-3 years ago when you were trying to get this going. You're now saying it's not difficult, it's impossible. Why?
Well, if you're asking me that specific question, what I would say is, if I was offered Mr. Bates versus the Post Office now as a prospective development, I would not take it on, no. Because that particular drama has a large cast, it has to be filmed in London, it's only 4 parts long at best. I mean, that we were afraid that people wouldn't even watch it for 4 episodes. And it's about sub-postmasters and computer systems. So your ability to raise an international advance on it is really, really limited. I think there are 4-parters that you could make for £1.6 million an hour that are filmable outside London, anywhere, that are a much smaller cast, much more contained, and are mostly about, the same characters sitting in rooms talking. And the story can feel enormous. There are some very, very good dramas being made like that. So you have to pick your battles. But if you want to raise anything more than £1.8 million an hour for a 4-part drama, it's impossible. And if it's not built around a crime, it's even harder. And I mean a murder, a traditional crime, So then it's easier to sell.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So just saying, you are now as an independent producer, just from your position as an independent producer, which have lots of creative ambitions, but you've got people employed and you've got to avoid going bust. Does that mean you are driven to look at things like for example, you're heavily involved in Peaky Blinders and whatever. Does that mean that no matter what you would like to do, idealistically, as it were, you will have to look at returning series which are often about crimes if you really want to make your company successful?
In this current marketplace for the next 2 to 3 years, I will probably not develop any more limited series that are not crime-based, yes. Unless I can figure out a way to make them very, very cheaply. Yes, I'm saying yes to your question with a slightly more nuanced answer. They don't all have to be returning. I mean, if you've got a huge piece of IP, and that might be a true story, by the way, and it's not expensive to set up, then you can do limited series, but I would probably need it to be 6 episodes long, not 4. Because we in this country are used to the idea of a 4-part drama as a part of our cultural history. We love it. We love them. And internationally, on the whole, they don't sell that well because most countries go, what do we do with only 4 episodes? We'd prefer 8. We'll settle at 6, but we're not taking 4. We don't know what to do with it. So they're quite hard to sell.
And is this, I mean, some people would say, okay, well, the way to resolve this is to significantly increase the BBC licence fee. Mind you, that's still but even if the BBC were able to put up a larger proportion of the money across with Channel 3, 4, 5, presumably, the advertising revenues proportionately are going down. The advertising revenue being sucked up by other organisations we could name. So actually, whereas a political act, if you like, could improve the situation with the BBC and its funding, there are larger existential questions about advertising-supported programming in this country, aren't there?
There is a body of producers right now talking to government, of which, in a way, we are all a part, who are saying, if you want us to continue to make shows like Mr. Bates and Wolf Hall, then you need to increase the tax break available to producers filming in this country. Otherwise, the limited series and exquisitely British shows that some of them that you have taken for granted so far will disappear. And if you think about it, the single film for television has already disappeared, hasn't it? I mean, they make maybe 1 or 2 a year, whereas 30 years ago, we'd be watching 15 to 20 of them a year. The BBC were magnificent about making Screen 1s and Screen 2s, and Channel 4 had a great tradition of them as well. Even ITV, remember, made Hillsborough as a single film. So that has already gone. As an art form, as a cultural, as a vehicle in which a writer can talk to the nation, that has gone. The next domino to fall, if you will be the 4-part drama. And it's already happening unless someone acts fast.
Now, you raised the question of tax breaks which are being discussed, but Peter Kuzminski, of course, put up the idea that there should be a levy on the streamers. Do you think that has any, would it work, and is there an appetite for it?
Do you know what? I don't know enough to decide or to offer an opinion on whether a levy or a tax break would be better. I can only tell you, because I'm in the trenches, that we need something done. And, my fear is that if this country put up a levy right now in this international political climate, that all that would happen is those streamers would go to Trump and he would punish us for it. So I don't think there's any point in fighting for a levy at the moment, but I may be wrong. And Peter is fighting a very, very good fight for it, and he's a very smart and brilliant man. So I'm not saying I wouldn't support it. I'm just saying I think, luckily, the government is going to decide what's the best solution to the problem, but they are at least clearly listening that we have a serious problem.
And, of course, we've seen President Trump, we don't know how seriously to take the question of tariffs that he's talked about, but he obviously wishes to return production to Hollywood, although there's quite a lot of production that's moved from Hollywood within the United States and elsewhere. But you would have to think that over the next 4 years, through tariffs or not, the amount of American production in this country is likely to diminish somewhat. Now, if that's so, in one way that's bad news for some people working in the industry. On the other hand, it might mean that the inflation rate, which has affected production because of demand, might drop a little. What's your view about that? Does this have any impact on somebody like you?
It may affect inflation. It may bring crew rates down a bit, but that small upside, if indeed it could be called an upside, is nothing compared to the savage consequences if American productions leave these shores. We're already an industry in disarray, and I'm aware of how that must sound to someone who doesn't work in the industry. They must look in and go, what on earth are you talking about? But we are an industry in disarray. We desperately need help. And if those American productions go back to America and take work away from the freelance community, I really fear. Yeah.
And also we're talking about a freelance community, which, I mean, you keep hearing these hideous figures that almost seem impossible, that at certain points 70% of freelancers are not in work at a particular moment. Now, allowing for the fact that there'd always be some not in work, that's an astonishing figure. I mean, how long are you, if you've got a family and a mortgage, How long can you wait for the industry to recover before you say, I'm not, going to be like actors used to be, take a job as a waitress or a waiter?
Anecdotally, I am hearing a lot of people are retraining. Yeah.
Really talented people as well. The other question, other thing which also you wonder about, the ability of government or say the BBC in these circumstances to, as it were, redirect production. I mean, the BBC has made a big pitch, obviously influenced and encouraged by government, to move production to Salford. You were a former head of drama for BBC Northern Ireland, and there was a real attempt to ensure there was significant production in Northern Ireland. Indeed, we've got, of course, a wonderful crime series coming out of there still now. But is the ability then for the BBC in particular to, as it were, direct drama production out of London other than, say, to Cardiff, is that threatened now, do you think?
It's a very good question. Before I answer it, I do want to point out that in my time at BBC Northern Ireland, I failed completely to get drama filming in Northern Ireland. My successor, a brilliant man called Stephen Wright, who won the BAFTA was one of the team who won the BAFTA for Blue Lights recently, on Sunday. He was the guy that really generated that momentum. So I want that on record. I think it is going to become harder to do all the things that we want to do. I think more drama will end up leaving London because it's too expensive to film in London. So actually, I think the BBC will be helped in that endeavour by practical decision-making, which is, do you know what, we can't afford to film in London. Locations are just too expensive. Crew rates are too expensive. So anyway, I think more and more we are filming outside London.
Well, I hope, in that series in Northern Ireland, I always thought it was a fact crept up on us, and I just thought it was fabulous. But it is crime.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it is brilliant, but it is crime. Of course, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that, but it is crime.
You can do great drama with crime. It's not that I don't want to develop crime. I love crime. I worked on Cracker. It was the first show I ever worked on. I'm making a crime show at the moment that I'm passionate about. All I ask is that we have a broad range of dramas available to us. And at the moment, if you're a producer making decisions based on common sense, you're probably going to steer more and more of your slate towards crime and thriller than you might have done in the past, because they're the ones most likely to sell. So I think the overall kind of television landscape in 2-3 years' time will be affected by that, and we'll only know that in 2-3 years' time when all these shows appear.
And we know that although everybody argues about crime statistics and so on, you've got to be very careful. On the whole, the general picture is there is less crime than there was 20 years ago and less crime than was 40 years ago, in fact, but more crime in terms of programmes and series. Although, hold on, we were doing Dixon Doc Green 60 years ago, weren't we? But as some people outside the cosy establishment of the British broadcasting would say, hold on a second, look at what Netflix have just done with adolescents, for example. And they are, the suggestion was that they couldn't make something like that, and they have done. Does that in any way make you rethink the fact that, we can rely or anticipate that the big streamers will cover subject matter, again, like adolescents, which could have been made by BBC or could have been made by ITV?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And my answer to that is simple. I think, firstly, we should all cheer Netflix's recent commissions, and not just Adolescents, but Toxic Town and Baby Reindeer are all sensational, bold, exquisitely British shows that indeed the broadcasters could have made themselves. But it is only 3 shows. And Netflix can only, by the way, I don't know their commissioning numbers, but I'm guessing it might be 10 British shows a year. They can maybe only commission 3 shows like that every year, at most, maybe only 2, that are exquisitely British shows that are not, frankly, obviously reaching for the mainstream, because they've got bigger targets to hit, and they've got to keep a wide crowd happy. And sure as hell, Netflix did not commission Baby Reindeer and Adolescents because they thought they'd be big hits. They commissioned them because they thought they were brilliant, and they turned into big hits, just like many of those shows that you don't necessarily imagine will hit the bullseye like that. So if Netflix are only doing 2 or 3 of them a year at best, and brilliant that they're doing them, and God, they're good shows, how many are you counting that Apple, Disney and Amazon are making? Because the answer's pretty small. Disney's just released the de Menez drama, but my understanding is they won't be doing many more stories like that. And that's only one in 3 or 4 years. And Amazon and Apple's work, whilst brilliant, doesn't include those kind of dramas. So we can't expect Netflix to carry the load for all of the streamers, and we might expect 2 or 3 of them from Netflix a year. The BBC and ITV, if you count up the amount of exquisitely British limited series in 3, 4 to 6 parts, we might normally hope that they, between them, would make 20 of them a year. What we're suggesting is that if they can't carry the load, then we're all slightly screwed.
Well, there are conversations going on at the moment and suggestions that actually we can only afford to have 2 big broadcasters in this country. The BBC, of course, and an argument that should be better funded. But some people are floating the idea that channels 3, 4 and 5 should be combined into one, as it were, big broadcaster to compete. It's not an idea that goes down very well with Channel 5, I think, at the moment. Channel 4, a bit disarray. The chief executive is leaving, the chairman's gone. I'm not sure about Channel 3. There have been talks of merger with other people. But in principle, is it attractive? Would it be attractive to you if 3, 4 and 5 combined? And so with the BBC, we have 2, one assumes, better funded, fundamentally British public service to a degree organisations. Would that improve the situation?
No, I don't think it would. My immediate response to that, which is possibly a little knee-jerk, because the idea I haven't thought about that recently, is that then what you're saying is that there'll be only 2 commissioners. And our portfolio of options for exquisitely British drama will be chosen not by 5, but by 2 people. And not that there aren't some very talented commissioners out there, but you want as many different doors to go through as a producer as possible to give you a range of options. And say what you like about any of these channels, but Channel 5, for instance, having decided that they would get into drama, have knocked it out the park recently. They're making more and more dramas on very, very low budgets and getting really decent audiences, and they've opened up a new marketplace. Channel 4 have just doubled down on drama recently with a new team, and they're doubling the amount of drama they're making, and that's really exciting too. And Polly is just storming it at ITV. So that's 3 commissioners that we can go to alongside the BBC. I wouldn't want to limit the number of those, but I have that's self-serving. As a producer, I want more doors to go into because I want a broader range of dramas to be able to make.
And finally, can you talk to me what you are involved in at the moment? Are you still making The Hack? Is that still going ahead?
Yes, I can talk about The Hack. It's been announced. It's coming out in the autumn. It's a 7-part drama written by Jack Thorne, who you'd know from Adolescence and Toxic Town and 25 other great dramas.
And The Hack, by the way, we should say, is about the phone hacking operation, which some people would link to the Murdoch empire, and precisely its links is disputed, but there's no doubt that it existed, that the Sun was heavily involved, as was, etc., etc., etc. That's still going ahead, and presumably the lawyers are all over it.
Well, anytime you do a factual drama, whether it's Mr. Bates or The Hack or any of the others that we've made, you definitely need to and want to go through a stringent compliance process, which involves compliance officers and lawyers. You need to have your facts checked, and you need to follow a very rigorous process where every single thing you say in the name of this is a true story needs to be stood up. So, oh yes, the lawyers are heavily involved. In every show we did, they were as heavily involved in Mr. Bates as they were in The Hack. Same compliance team at ITV, they're brilliant. And yes, it is about phone hacking, and it interweaves 2 true stories. One, and we're not the first people to have pointed out the possibility that these stories are linked. Others have written about it and done podcasts about it before us. But it is interweaving the story of the Guardian's investigation into phone hacking with the Metropolitan Police investigation into the murder of Daniel Morgan, and asking the audience to see if they can spot why we're doing that and what the connections are. And the answers to that question may make you quite angry.
I can't wait. That's in the autumn. And meanwhile, looking further ahead, it's crime, yeah? It's crime.
Well, no, as it happens, no. The next two dramas that I kind of got under the wire, we got financed before the world kind of imploded, that we're not filming till next year. I'm doing two more limited series, both true stories, and then a crime show as well with a brilliant Australian writer. I probably shouldn't say any more than that.
Oh, well, don't worry, I won't tell anybody. Well, Patrick Spence, you're already overloaded with BAFTAs and RGS awards. I'm sure some of those that you've mentioned will add to the cupboard. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Roger. Thank you. It's lovely to meet you.
If you're enjoying our journalism, please do support us for less than the price of a cup of coffee per month. You can do this by either a one-off payment on our crowdfunding page or regularly by signing up to patreon.com/BeebWatch for £1.99 per month. By signing up to Patreon, this will also entitle you to my weekly blog, which gives my take on the week's interview. The link to this and our crowdfunding page can be found in the description of this programme. That's it for this week, and as you probably know, this podcast is presented by me, Roger Bolton, and it's produced by Kate Dixon. The sound is by Dave Kitto, and special thanks to Quinn Genti. It's a Good Egg production. Until next time, goodbye.